Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Outer North East Community Committee. My name is Councillor Norma Harrington, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. The Outer North East Community Committee covers all Woodley, Harewood and Wetherby wards, and is a committee where ward councillors have an opportunity to discuss and make decisions about services and priorities for the local area, and also consider funding applications for local community projects and youth activities. Is there echo on this, or is it just me? No, okay. Could I now invite members and officials to introduce themselves, and I'll start from this side down. So we'll go all the way along there to Councillor Stables, then we'll come back up here, and then you two can introduce yourselves at the end. All right, thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. My name's Carl and I'm from the communities team.
Now it's working. Just press it.
Elaine Matson, communities team.
Good afternoon, Councillor Lynn Buckley or Woodley Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Neil Buckley or Woodley Ward.
Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward.
Councillor Ryan Stevenson from the Harewood Ward. I'm going with good evening. Councillor Alan Lamb from the Wetherby Ward.
Councillor Penny Stables from Wetherby Ward.
Andy Birkbeck from the Safer Stronger communities team.
And Councillor Sam Firth from the Harewood Ward.
Good evening, Toby Russell, clerk to the committee.
Evening, everyone. Mike Eakins, Head of Policy at the Council.
Luke Andrews, Intelligence and Policy Officer.
Thank you. Can the clerk please run through agenda items 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item number 2, there are no items which would require the exclusion of the press and the public. Under item number 3, there are no formal late items, but supplementary information was circulated to members, and that's in relation to item 10, the finance report. Agenda item number 4, apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Dan Cohen. And under agenda item number 5, can I ask members to declare any interest they may have? No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Usually at the discretion of the chair, there is a period of up to 10 minutes to be allocated at each ordinary meeting for members of the public to make representations or to ask questions on matters within the terms of reference to the community committee. No member of the public would speak for more than 3 minutes in the open forum without the express permission of the chair. There are no members of the public here this evening, and we haven't received any written. No. Okay, thank you. So we're on to item number 7, which is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of July. I didn't chair that meeting, so could members who were here say whether they can be accepted as a correct record, please? Thank you. Where's that? What? Sorry. No. Well, he's not here. He's not here. No. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That's it. Was very nice of him to step in at the last minute. Thank you very much. Matters arising from the minutes. Do members wish to raise any matters from those minutes? No.
Christmas is Christmas, not Christmas.
Yes. Thank you. It's agenda item number 9 is the Best City Ambition Refresh, and I'd invite Mike and Luke to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Hi, everyone. If you bear with me, I've got some very, very brief, I promise, slides that I will stick up on screen. With any luck. There we go. So, firstly, thank you very much for having us this evening. And you may remember that we came to talk to the community committee about 2 years ago now, when we were developing the Best City Ambition after we'd moved on from the Best Council plan. And the purpose of coming to you today really is to reflect further on the last 2 years with the ambition in place as we about to embark on the first update of that document, but very specifically keen to talk to you about some of the things that we talked about last time that we've taken away and developed, and really to come back and test that with you again. So just very briefly, what I'm going to cover today is very quickly a reminder of what the Best City Ambition is, a little bit of focus on what we've learned about Outer North East from the most recent census. Obviously, understanding the city is a really key part of being able to generate these sorts of strategies and plans. And then revisiting, the major thing I want to talk about is revisiting the biggest issue you raised with us 2 years ago, which was perhaps the inability at that point in time to effectively measure the progress towards the Best City Ambition. And very, very much took that away, and have done work since. So I want to come back and test with you the plans going forward. And then a few other questions at the bottom there, which we'll come to at the end. So Best City Ambitions, our overall vision for the future of Leeds. And you will recall, it's very much about both what we want to achieve for the city, but crucially about how we want to do it. And the way that sort of manifests itself is through the 3 pillars that you'll all be very familiar with by this point. And then that promoting that team leads approach where everyone has a part to play in terms of driving towards the city's ambitions. And the third point on the slide there gets increasingly difficult in the financial context, but it's also about being ambitious and optimistic. There are still things we can do in Leeds despite the context within which we operate. And that's really what this is about, is trying to set a vision for the next period, the next sort of 10 or so years. Since we adopted the ambition in February 2022 at full council, we've had some really positive feedback, and I've just summarised on screen there a couple of points from the peer review we had last year that were really encouraging, actually, in terms of the ownership that the city at large has already, particularly partner organisations, have taken of the Best City Ambition. And this is really what we're trying to build on. And as I mentioned, this is the first update, and it includes taking forward and embedding some of the things we spoke about previously. And this is the 3 areas we're really focused on. The first of which, just as I said, there's sort of, we're not aiming for major change here. It's very much evolution, not revolution, of the current ambition. And based on that peer review feedback and other general feedback, I think we're broadly confident that with the 3 pillars, with the teams approach, we're on the right track. It's about refining that further where we can. And there are 3 things we're really focusing on in this update. The first is concluding the work done over the last couple of years and filling gaps in the current version. The biggest of those areas is monitoring progress, but there's also things around making sure the partnership arrangements we have in place to take forward the Best City Ambition are set out clearly. The second thing is updating it to reflect where we are now. There's been separate consultations, I think possibly with community committees too, in terms of new health and wellbeing and inclusive growth strategies. So I won't dwell on those things, but clearly we need to update the Best City Ambition in that context. And then the third thing is taking this team leads approach further. So what we set out in there currently are some principles about what that is. What we don't say enough about is what does that look like on the ground? How do you achieve it? What are the practical things we can actually do? And we want to bring some of that in this time. So I briefly mentioned we've sort of done some reflection on the census and the Outer North East, and a lot of this will not be surprising to you, but there are the odd bit I thought was worth highlighting. So population growth in the area, nearly 5% over the last 10 years, which is about 3,000 people. Quite considerably below the Leeds average, but nevertheless still a growing population. And as you will know, much lower population density in this area than in the city as a whole. So we've got a bit of analogy here. If you lay football pitches across the whole of Leeds, in Outer North East, about 4 people would live in each pitch-sized area, whereas across Leeds as an average, it's about 20. And in some of the inner city areas, you're up pushing towards 60. Outer North East does book some of the trends, though, that we see across the Leeds average, where we see, ongoing shifts in terms of housing tenure. So the number of people who are owning outright, owning with a mortgage, socially renting and privately renting. Booking those trends, Outer North East has remained remarkably consistent over the last decade. So you've seen very, very slight uptick in the number of people who own a property outright and a sort of corresponding downtrend in the number of people who own with a mortgage. But we're talking very, very small changes, which is quite interesting in terms of the stability of the market there in this area. And you won't be surprised to know, travel to work is changing. But again, in Outer North East, these trends are particularly pronounced compared to Leeds as a whole. So if you look back to 10 years ago, about 70% drove their own van or car to work, and only 8% of people in the area work from home. That's changed enormously now, where you've got about 43% of people spending the majority of their time working from home in outer northeast, considerably higher than the average in Leeds, and only 44% of people are regularly driving. Just another sort of additional point there on bus patronage and the use of buses to get to work. That similarly has fallen by about half in the area over the last 10 years, which, you know, we may all have suspicions about why some of that change may be, but certainly in a context when we're talking about additional powers in West Yorkshire to potentially take more control of the bus network, it's useful to be aware about the impact that has locally. And just a couple of other final bits here, I suppose, really reflecting on three aspects of what you might say lead people towards having sort of thriving lives and living well. On education, I mean, a lot of this probably won't be surprising, but on education, we do see considerably higher levels of people who've got at least a level 4 qualification, and considerably lower than a number of people with no formal qualifications than the Leeds average. That picture is mirrored in terms of health, not quite to the same extent, but slightly better health than the average, and slightly fewer people with poor health. What was quite interesting and different for outer northeast compared to the rest of the city is on religion. So for those, the similarity here being that outer northeast, as with the rest of Leeds and indeed the rest of the country, the largest group is now the number of people who say they have no religion, which is nearly 30% of people in the community committee area. But the fall in the the proportion of people who describe themselves as Christian, while falling, is falling by considerably less than in the rest of Leeds and indeed the country. So the fall here is about 15%, whereas you're looking 20 to 25% across the rest of Leeds. So again, we can speculate why that may be. There's something to do with the sort of demographic profile, the age profile of the area may be part of that, but I'm speculating. We need to look into that further. And similarly, we've seen about 1,000 people, which is about 33% fall in the Jewish population, and a corresponding increase in the Muslim population over the last 10 years. So again, sort of interesting demographic there. What's different, again, though, across a lot of Leeds now, you see the Muslim population being clearly the second most prominent or third most prominent demographic group after Christianity and no religion, whereas in outer northeast you don't see that. You actually see a relatively flat trend after you get past those first two, with the Muslim population, the Jewish population, and a number of others around relatively the same number of people. So again, some differences there to the rest of Leeds. As I mentioned, when we came last time, we talked a lot about we were moving away from the Best Council plan, and your very, very fair points you made as a committee were, what can you tell us what's changed over the last 10 years? And the answer was, not really, which obviously was not satisfactory. And what we committed to do was to go away and make sure that with the Best City ambition, that would not be the case. We would be able to tell you really clearly how we've made progress or not. And so what's on screen here is really how we're proposing to do that. And there are three ways, really. The first is the most straightforward. We've got a range of performance indicators and key strategies that will continue to be the case. They'll be updated, and we will monitor performance against those things. The other two are much more relevant to what you challenged us with last time. And the first is that we've developed the tool called the Leeds Social Progress Index, which I'm going to show you a little bit of in a minute. And this really enables us to look, we can't do it at community committee geography currently, but we can do it at a ward level. And we can, across about 50 indicators, we can track progress and trends over time. And I'll show you how that works. And this will really help us to pinpoint at quite a localized level what's moving in the right and wrong direction. We've got ambitions to take that below ward level in the near future as well. And then the final thing will be a much deeper periodic analysis every 3 years, where we will look at analysis across a range of factors from health, the environment, community safety, education, and we can cut that both by demographic group and spatially by different sort of areas of the city. And we're about to start that work again imminently, aiming to report the 2024 report in July next year. So I just wanted to dwell, I'm hoping this works, I just wanted to dwell slightly on the Social Progress Index and just show you really what we can see with that. But the screen isn't updating, unfortunately. Oh dear. Sorry, bear with me. Let me try and unshare and reshare. Sorry about this. There we go. So with the Leeds Social Progress Index, there are a number of things that we can do. And I'm going to show you two particular use cases at the moment. Sorry, I've got loads of clutter on my screen. There we go. So the first one is the scorecard. And what this does when it eventually loads is for every ward in the city, you can have a look at this range of indicators. And it basically provides a picture of both how positive or negative things are in that ward, but also relative to the rest of the city. So if we pick, because it's the easiest one to get to in this community committee area, if I pick Wetherby, and you can see here how Wetherby compares. Now, the reason this is particularly useful is each of these domains breaks down into quite some detail. So I'm just going to dwell on personal safety in the bottom left here. And you can see that across the city, Wetherby ranks 4th in terms of personal safety and has a really, really strong rating there. So you would think, well, brilliant, everything's fantastic there. But what the SPI enables us to do is you can see, yes, you've got really good outcomes on antisocial behaviour, crime rates, domestic abuse. But actually, there's a significant issue in the ward with the number of people being killed or seriously injured on the roads, where out of the 33 wards, Wetherby ranks 20th out of 33. Now, that's masked by sort of the headline figures, but when we start to drill down a little bit more, and this is version 1, we want to take this a lot further, you can really start to understand some of the issues underneath that. When we can take this down below ward level as well, and you'll be able to see what we call output areas, which I won't bore you with, but it's basically groups of streets, what you might call it like a neighbourhood. You'll be able to look at this on that level as well. So suddenly we can make much more intelligent judgments about what's going on and how things are moving. And on how things are moving, the other bit I just want to dwell on, and this is crucial in terms of that progress point, is this. Let me see if I can full screen this. Now, this is for me, probably the most powerful part of the SPI, which really lets us track progress over time. So I'm just, for consistency, I'll select personal safety again, and you will see this update. And what we can do here is, at the moment, we've got 3 years of data in this tool, but we're going to put the 2 more years of data will be going in before Christmas, and then we'll be aiming to keep this up to date at least once a year. And what you can do is, as you can hopefully see, you've got 3 colours, sort of greeny, proper green and blue for 2018, 2019 and 2020. And it's very, very simple. The further right it is, the better the outcome on this grid. So you can see over time how things are moving. So again, here, if we look in Alwoodley, you are seeing you're seeing essentially on personal safety things go in the wrong direction, unfortunately. So in 2018, we were furthest right. We've moved slightly left in 2019 and further left still in 2020. Remember, this is about killed and seriously injured, crime rates, domestic abuse, and the 4th thing that I've forgotten. But if you compare that to Harewood, you're seeing the absolute opposite trend, where the 3 dots are moving consecutively in the opposite direction. So again, this doesn't necessarily tell us, and it doesn't tell us why, but what it can do is direct those lines of inquiry and allow you to see how the ward is comparing. Just for completion, Wetherby pretty consistently, sort of very, very little change over the same period. So I'll stop there, but hopefully that gives a sort of flavour of what we can do with the SPI and certainly how it can help us to measure progress over time. So just finally, my questions to you, I suppose, and happy to take obviously any questions you've got. But based on that very, very quick run through, are you sort of confident, content that what we're proposing addresses the challenge you set us last time? And I suppose crucially, is there anything we're missing that you think we should be really taking forward as a priority for further development? And then slightly more broadly, to help us with the general update of the Best City ambition, I mentioned we want to take the idea of team leads further in terms of how do you achieve it? What does it look like when you achieve that on the ground? So just reflecting on the work that you do in Outer North East, really, how do you see that working in the community? When you think of partnership working, what works well? Maybe where are the barriers? If I sit here talking about partnership work and some of you sort of want to roll the eyes at that potentially, what are the things where you think, yeah, that really, really doesn't work for us? Because that's what we need to be focusing on as we try to move forward. So I'll stop there, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Thanks very much.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that really comprehensive presentation. I think that there's been some wider discussions that we've all had when it came to Strategy and Resources Board earlier in the year about the Social Progress Index. And I'm delighted to hear that you're going to take it down to a more granular level because of the wider discussion that we've always had. The fact that, for example, in particularly our ward of Harewood Ward, being it's such a large ward and also probably the biggest contributor to why actually there's so many people on that football pitch, because I suspect it's even less for the Harewood Ward as mentioned in the presentation. Can you just give us some more detail about how lower level you're going to be going to? Is it, when you say the operational areas, is it like, for example, when we used to get COVID data, or is it going to be, for example, at a parish level, or could you give us some more detail? Thank you.
Certainly, I can't give you is a definitive, but what we're aiming to do is to take it down to what we call lower super output area, which is basically groups of about 1,000 people, or a small collection of streets is what we're aiming for. The challenge, as you'll appreciate, is not all of the data is available at that level. So there's a bit of a balance here between having as much in the SPI as we want in there, while also accepting some of that isn't available at that level. But we've got a sort of development list of key of indicators that we're aiming to put together. And over the next few years, we hope we will get there. There should be some movement in version 2 by the end of this year. The team that in economic policy that are developing that are just working through that at the moment. But certainly in the medium term, the ambition is to get it down so you'll be able to look at a lower super output area. So a collection of 4 or 5 streets.
I just wanted to come back. Thank you for that, Mike. I think the big thing for us is the fact that, for example, in a ward like Harewood that has a reputation and a name like that some of our colleagues castigate because they just rely with the stately home, we do have pockets of deprivation, and we also have council estates in many of our villages. And ultimately, a lot of our residents ask, are we able to get the same investment as we would do if we were elsewhere in the city? And I just wanted to ask, really, do you have any further detail how the council, because when we talk about best city plan, we talk about best council plan and how it informs our decisions and how we invest in the future and our future potential of our residents. In what way is that going to be able to help and improve the work of we do in our wards, but also the outcomes for our residents as well in terms of the council? What is it that they're going to see in terms of how it's going to improve them rather than we just talking at this high level?
Thanks, Councillor Firth. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, as you say, that, I mean, every ward has pockets of poverty and inequality in it, no matter what sort of the general wealth of the ward is. And you, yeah, for sure. And we see that in all of the analysis that we do. The Best City ambition as a whole is absolutely, as a sort of kicked off at the start, targeted on trying to tackle poverty and inequality. That's wherever poverty and inequality exists. Obviously, in terms of below that and the individual decisions that get taken in various committees and boards and within directorates, I'm sure sort of you will be challenging them as you go. But in terms of the strategy that this sets out, it is to focus on tackling poverty and inequality. And what we will aim to do through the work that my team is doing in terms of presenting the data and the evidence, and we'll do this again when we pick up the joint strategic assessment over the next 6 months, is to really bring out all of that, the evidence for where that inequality exists, including in Harewood Ward.
Can I just ask very quickly on that point then, when that JSA comes in, will that also data be available on the same granular level that the SPI will be provided at?
Some of it will be, yes. Now, the number of data points that will be in the JSA are vastly more than we're talking about here. But wherever possible, certainly we will aim to make that available. And already we can provide deprivation data at that level already. I can get that to you now if you like.
Thanks, Nick. So we have Councillor Lamb, then Councillor Neil Buckley, then Councillor Stevenson, and then Councillor Robinson. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming. And I recall we met at the Arium last time, didn't we? And I think we should, the Arium, sorry. I think we should do that again, Chair, because I also recall we got cake when we were there. So we should definitely have more meetings there. Couple of practical things first. On the education slide, it looked like it referred to Inner East rather than outer Northeast, and the data didn't look like it was outer Northeast data. So it would be
apologies.
it's okay. It'd just be useful to have the accurate data. And then another practical, you said you couldn't provide the data on committee level, but you can provide on ward level.
Yeah.
Can you not just add 3 together?
It's a very good question. So I'm not an expert in terms of what the workings behind it. We may well be able to do that manually. What I meant was in terms of the tool itself, it's not set up to easily filter by community committee level. That is something we'll look to building in the future. I'd have to go back and check with the people who know how, because it's all indexed. It's not as simple as sort of adding up and dividing, because there's various weightings applied. So I'd need to go back and understand if that would work, if that makes sense.
To be fair, I think the ward level data is of most use to us anyway, and being able to break that down, particularly in our outer areas to specific communities, would help us. My principal question really is around what does success look like? And it follows on a little bit from Councillor Firth's point, because if the goal is to reduce inequality and poverty, which absolutely everyone's going to sign up to that, when you look at it strategically, it draws you to certain parts of the city where we know in our area that there are people living in poverty. It's masked by the headline. I think what we would all want to see is that the focus is on tackling poverty and inequality everywhere, not just where it's most concentrated. Yes, you understand that's where the resources should be, but I've been around this table for 17 years and making the same point. It's a lot harder to be poor in places like Wetherby and Harewood, because you don't have the same access to concentration of services and things like that. So really, I suppose it's what does success look like for the city, and how would, if you were to come back to us in 5 years and say, right, yeah, these are the metrics that tell us that we've achieved what we wanted to, and what would it look like locally to us? Because some people would say, well, they're doing all right out there in Wetherby, so we don't need to worry, just let them get on with it. Where actually we want everyone to do better. We want the areas that are lagging behind to do better faster. But it's just getting that understanding of really simple, because that was the challenge really last time. It was 10 years after the first plan, could you demonstrate it had an impact? And the honest answer was no, we couldn't. And I'd hate to be sat here in another 10 years and say, right, we've now 20 years of this, and we still can't demonstrate any impact, or all the indicators are stubbornly where they were when we started. And then you'd have to, well, the approach didn't work, did it? So that's a long-winded way of saying, how do we know if this has worked or not?
So for sure. So in terms of this should apply everywhere, absolutely. And certainly what we're trying to do with the provision of this kind of data and information, I think makes that argument easier. It really brings to the fore what we should be focusing on, no matter where that is in the city. In terms of what success looks like, I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? And I suspect across different areas, different parts of the data, different areas of what we do, it probably looks different. So I mean, this is something I'm sure will be endlessly debated amongst yourselves as politicians as we go forward. But I suppose in some areas that the aim is to reduce poverty and reduce inequality. What we found over recent years is that sometimes standing still is also progress. And what we'll be aiming to do as we go forward is as much as we can to benchmark Leeds against similar places, so we can see the relative change to other places that are facing some of the same challenges that we are. And again, that's not in what I've demonstrated today, but will be in that joint strategic assessment. So that's where we've got the collection of tools available to us. So if we see Leeds performing relatively well versus other major cities in the UK, we may see that as progress, but I suppose everyone will form their own judgment about whether that's enough. It's a really difficult question to answer. That's probably the best I've got.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buckley.
I've got 3 or 4 questions, Chair.
Just following on from Councillor Lamb's point about the best city ambition, it just strikes me, what does it mean? Because best in what? If we say it's the best in England, the best in the United Kingdom, and it just strikes me that in some of these statistics, you've gathered a whole wealth of statistics and presented them to us. Some are good and some are not so good, like the road accidents, for example. But what does it mean? For instance, if there was a car accident today on the council estate in Woodley, near where we live, and 5 people were killed, that will probably skew the figures for the whole year, wouldn't it? And that just strikes me as woolly. Now, what are stakeholders? Who are stakeholders? That's mentioned in the presentation. And you mentioned that there's been a dramatic change in how people work, from 70% of people driving into Leeds to 43% working from home. That's in 2021, at the height of the pandemic. This is almost 2024. It's a meaningless statistic, isn't it? And also, what also skews these things, which is a slightly different point, is that if 43% of people are driving into and working from home and not driving into the city, then we're going to have even fewer buses than we had before, because they're unjustifiable. And how does that work with the best city ambition? I'll leave it there for the moment, Chair.
So to take them slightly in reverse order, so on the sort of data point initially, certainly, obviously with any data here, we need to be aware of the context in which it was taken. And that applies to everything that I've talked about here today as well. So certainly, we need to bear that in mind when we look at and making any decisions based upon that. The purpose of sharing some of that census information with you today was really just to get a sense of what we've taken out of that and how Outer North East compares to possibly other parts of Leeds, which is all being judged sort of on its same terms, if you see what I mean. But of course, before any decisions would be taken based on, well, it's unlikely you're taking decisions based just on that. But you would need to be wary of that context for sure. In terms of the stakeholders that referred to in the presentation, I think it's on the slide where we're reflecting on the findings of the peer review. So what they were referring to in that sense was really everyone who had a part in delivering the best city ambition. So that's the council, partner organisations, staff. They met with I think sort of citizen groups and community groups as well. I think they met with citizen groups and community groups as well when they were here. So that's what they were reflecting on when they talked about the stakeholders who were part of that. So absolutely including the public.
Community groups and that kind of thing are not the public. They're just a self-selecting tiny fragment. They're not the public. I just feel that it's a missed opportunity because we're 3 years out of date.
Can I just butt in there and possibly help a little bit? The big Leeds chat, Neil, which went across the whole city and was taken out of, because first of all, they did it in Kirkgate Market and they did it in central Leeds. And we said at the time, we need to take it out around the communities. So they did do that. They've done that 2 years on the trot, and they based themselves in village halls and community centres and said, we are going to be here, come and talk to us, we'll be here for the whole day. And they went out giving out leaflets on the street as well. So I guess that would be the general public being consulted on that maybe. But I accept your point about the community group, certainly.
Thanks, Councillor. Absolutely, and the big Leeds chat will be repeated again in future years as another route to gain that insight. I suppose just generally, for sure, some of this data is already aging, but it will be repeated. The social progress index I outlined, we're aiming to base that on as up-to-date data as possible, and again, that will be regularly updated, so it uses the latest possible data. What I've talked through here is really just a snapshot in time. We won't get a census again, but the rest of the data will be regularly updated. So we're always working with what's the latest picture we can be aware of.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. My experience of consultations isn't great, really. I think when we look at all of the various streams we've had, transport, this kind of thing, it's always a few people who respond, and I think the big Leeds chat is probably a bit of an oxymoron, really. It's more of a tete-a-tete, I think, between the council and a selected handful of people. So it would be useful to know how many people out of the entirety of the city of Leeds, as a percentage, engage in the big chat. That would be quite useful for us to know. I suspect it's a very small number, but you might want to reflect on that or give us an answer. But my main question was just going to be about the figures you gave us and what use they are and what level of analysis goes on. So you picked out on Wetherby Ward on the issue of law and order that Wetherby Ward was, I think, the second best place in the city not to be domestically abused. Now, how do you look at the other data to see why that might be? And are you doing any analysis about what are the other elements that feed in that result in that? And whether that data is of use at all, whether there is any correlation. And the reason I raise that is because I have a fear that whenever we talk about poverty strategies, for example, on Children's Scrutiny Board, we discuss this quite a lot. We're always told that when you've only got so much cash, you have to prioritize. So you're picking out the areas where you might get more bang for your buck as such. That's of no comfort to the people who are victims of domestic abuse wherever they live in the city. So my fear in terms of data, and I love data, but it can tell you what you want it to tell you if you manipulate it in the right way. And my fear would be that rather than actually look at the themes and the causes and the similarities in some of that data, that actually we might start focusing in on certain areas and tickling around the edges rather than actually dealing with the actual cause and effect.
Thanks, Councillor. So on the big Leeds chat, I haven't got the figures to hand. I'm sorry. I suspect you'll be right in terms of the headline number as a proportion of the entire 800,000 people. It will be a considerably smaller number than that. I will have to come back to you on the actual turnout of that in the 2 years that it's been run. On sort of, I mean, the specific issue of domestic violence and abuse, although this would apply across the piece, we'd have to go away and talk to colleagues sort of working on that area to understand the full range of data that they take into account when designing interventions or agreeing investment priorities that are put forward for a decision. I mean, very sort of happy to go away and do that. I wouldn't feel confident giving you a sort of detailed answer on that here because it's not something I'm sort of involved in.
Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we're perhaps following on a slight theme here. But yeah, I love medium super output areas, lower super output areas as well. I have to work with indexes for work and things like that. 2 points that I'm really keen to get your thoughts on, Mike, for how we can take this forward. The first is the data that you shared about that change in terms of people working from home. It is really significant, particularly when you align it with the broadband statistics that are there showing that actually the speeds are lower in our area. Actually, it's not just speeds, we should be looking at uptake as well, something that I've long campaigned on, we've long campaigned on us in the Harewood Ward to actually up the coverage in our area and make sure that more people can access higher speed broadband. When you put that against 43% of people working from home, it's now not just preferential, it's essential, particularly in a city like ours. The second part to that then is we look at things like early years and declare an interest share on the early years provision as well. I'm sure Councillor Stevenson will too. But when we look at that, we're 32nd in the Harewood ward across Leeds in terms of what we can do for early years provision. That's a significant problem when we're considering that we want people to move into the area who are to start families and what that might mean for the future of the area. Both of those issues, the main part of funding is completely out of the control of Leeds City Council. It is private sector business rollout that's there, or private sector provision that's in the area. So I guess the question firstly is, what can the City Council do, if anything, on that? It's great that we have the stats, but you've told me something that I might not be able to do anything about. So what can we do in terms of that space? The other is then on water and sanitation. There's keen debate going on about water and sanitation at the moment. However, it suggests that 12th in Harewood, 9th in Wetherby, 19th in Alwoodley. Sorry on that. However, those stats don't, as best as I could see from having a quick look, relate to the health and quality of the rivers and streams and estuaries around our area. So does it give us, to Councillor Stevenson's point, a false picture of what might be going on? Or actually, is it an even better picture of what might be going on? Or are we not factoring in the data or reading it right? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Robinson. On the final point, yeah, you're right. It doesn't include that, and perhaps that's something we could take away and feed back as something that maybe we should look to include in future. Not least given, as you say, the amount of attention that's getting as an issue at the moment and the increase it's had in the public consciousness. So that's probably an area for further development that, again, will just over time continue to enrich the picture that this tool can give us. On the other 2 points on early years and broadband. Yeah, I mean, a compelling argument, very, very well made. I suppose what I would say it enables us to do as a city council is to have, stronger tools in our arsenal when we're entering any conversation with any other partner outside of this organisation to lobby for that investment, to argue for what communities in Leeds need. I think we've got very, very clear evidence that maybe we haven't had in the past that we can back up to demonstrate that point when having those conversations. And I suppose, as a sort of from my perspective, that would forever be my argument in terms of the value in more data, more information, even when it's not perfect and we need to sort of stick a caution label on it. Sometimes inevitably we're in a better position having this insight than we were before we had it, and it will help us going forward in any of those conversations.
Just as brief follow-up there, and it's maybe more of a point than a question, and maybe for you, Chair. So on the water and sanitation point, I'd absolutely suggest that we include that, and hopefully that can be a recommendation coming from this committee that should be included in the future, particularly given the profile of it in the media, but the relevancy for many residents. The second is on those broadband speeds. On the back of this, could I request, Chair, that a paper and officers come to a future board meeting to look at this issue and how we take it forward in light of the data that we've received today?
So Councillor Stables and then Councillor Cohen.
So a couple of points. One of them was just picking up on what Councillor Lamb said actually earlier, and it was just expanding it out a bit in that when we look at what's actually achieved and how that's measured, just really to reiterate that, because you talked about comparing the overall how we're achieving with other cities, but surely what would be a better measure is to look at by what the percentage increase is by every ward, and then look at the overall position, because unless we know by, it may be that we've focused on inner cities, which I'm sure we do rightly, but it may be that 50% we've got a big increase in, but the others actually we've got a decrease in, and that's so important to those areas. So we do need to have that detailed information going forward. So that was on that one. In terms of the percentages, we're talking about those working from home, which I found really interesting. So one of the questions is, when will we get an update in numbers? So when will we know actually post-COVID what the position is? And the second question, follow up from that, was we actually need a better breakdown. So if it's 42% working from home, does that actually mean 42% of people are working at home I'm sure it doesn't all the time, what percentage of the time are they working from home? Because, you know, most people nowadays actually have probably 2-3 days working from home and 2 days working in the office. When they're working in the office, how are they then getting in? So again, we need more detail on that to get a better picture overall of what's going on.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, really good points, really fair points. It's tricky on that one. So the source of that data was the 2021 census, which if we get another one, we won't get one for 10 years. So that is not a reliable source of updated information over the coming years. I suppose the issue of working from home in sort of specifically, and you can see from the census data where broadly across, no matter what part of Leeds you look at, it's gone from roughly like 2 or 3% to somewhere between 20 and 40 across the majority of the city. And that will be the case nationally. I think this is probably likely to become something that is studied more than we've had in the past. So there are a range of regular surveys that take place, most of them from ONS, annual population surveys, labour market surveys, that I don't know, I'm speculating, but I suspect this may well be something that comes into that going forward. So will give us a more regular source to monitor that. And as for your first point in terms of that progress monitoring with the city outside and included within the city app, yeah, absolutely. You articulated it far better than I did. So definitely take that point, and that is absolutely what we'll be looking to do.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
And finally, last but not least, Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite anxious about using the 2021 census in certain aspects, and I know you've talked to this, but a census taken at that particular time has within it data that we know it is no longer holding true. So to take the point my colleague made, Neil, Councillor Buckley, working from home in 2021 is so fundamentally different in terms of the numbers now, because the choice options were completely different. And I'm worried about a notion of building, apart from broadband speed, which is, I think, is just a necessity of life now, quite frankly. But to try to look at building a suite of services, the direction of travel, and a city plan that has within it the notion that a significant proportion of people are working from home for the majority of the time, when we're not certain that that is the case, is troubling for me. Now, I'm not saying that there are not still significant numbers of people working from home. The point is, we don't know. And to build a suite of service and a direction of travel around something that we just don't know, but that may well be quite likely on a false positive, is troubling. And I hear what you say when you say, oh, don't worry, councillor, we've got mechanisms to take that data blip into account. But actually, history shows us that once we've recorded data and we start to move in that, once it's written in a report, and we start to try, and suddenly we're reducing bus travel, because if people are working from home religiously 2 days a week out of 5, then straight away we need 40% less buses. And there starts to be a knock-on, and in areas of the city, for example, the outer northeast, where we are already served so poorly by public transport, that's so poorly sometimes they miss us off the actual map, where we rely on proper public services, even though the investment in our public services is weak at best. It worries me when we're using data that we know is quite likely skewed. And so while I'm sort of noting the point you're making, I'm not reassured by it, because history shows me that once we've recorded data, councils act on it. And this is dangerous data to act on because it was skewed. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cohen. I completely understand the point. I suppose just to stress and try to reassure you, I probably should have stuck a warning label on that slide. The purpose of sharing those, very, very, very high level sort of census insights with you today was really just a point of interest for the Outer North East. It's some of the information that was in the census that was different to other parts of the city. To absolutely stress that work from home data is not part of the Social Progress Index and will not be part of the Joint Strategic Assessment. There's no proposal to base any decision making or even to factor that into any evidence base that we're developing. It was solely the purpose of here this evening, giving you a bit of a flavour of what the census was telling us about Outer North East. I hope that sort of stresses the point and sets your mind at rest as much as I possibly can.
And thank you for taking the time to answer the questions that we've put to you tonight. You're very welcome to stay if you wish to do so, but we're quite happy to release you if you want to go. And I understand that Councillor Stevenson's got to be too. Okay, thank you. So we're now moving on to agenda item number 10, which is the finance report. And can I invite Carl and Elaine to introduce it, please?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so if I can take the committee through the finance report, please. So page 20 refers to the wellbeing budget position. So if I can just take councillors through their individual allocations across the 3 wards. So Alwoodley currently has £14,340.65 left. The Airwood ward, the actual balance for the ward is £16,558.73. And that's as a result of the project underspend, an amount being added back into that wellbeing budget. And then finally, we've got Wetherby, currently got £21,423.93. And then we've got a couple of wellbeing projects for consideration by the committee. More than happy to go through those, Chair, but I know we have had conversations with relevant councillors regarding whether or not they want to support those applications.
Anybody got any questions about any of that? No? Okay, thank you, Carl.
So paragraph 22 just refers to the fact that there's been no delegated decisions that have been taken since the last committee meeting on the 24th of July. Once again, the paragraph underneath just explains there's been no declined projects as such since the last committee meeting. And then page 21 refers to the YAF budget position. So once again, Alwoodley currently has got £887.80. The Airwood ward has got £8,028.63. And once again, that's a result of the project underspend. And then finally, Wetherby has got just over £400, so £427.97. Then once again, Chair, we've just got one project for consideration, but just to indicate that this has also been discussed with the relevant ward members.
Everybody happy for those? Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah. And then finally, Chair, in terms of the capital budget, there's been no change since the last committee meeting on the 24th of July. So Alwoodley has currently got £12,320.37. The Harewood ward has got £10,854.32. And then finally, we've got the Wetherby ward with £8,820.32. And that concludes the finance report, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Carl? No? Okay, thank you very much. So, about the late item.
So if I can just refer the committee back to the additional supplementary information in relation to the finance report. So this. Oh, okay. So this is a wellbeing project for consideration. It's the Airwood and Wetherby anti-burglary project. The total project cost is £7,838.16. Because it covers both of those wards, the proposal is that the two wards would split equally 50-50, which would mean that there would be £3,919.08 taken from both of those two wards. But also, once again, Chair, just to indicate that those conversations have taken place with the relevant ward members.
Everybody happy to approve that? Yes.
Yeah, we've taken your feedback on board, councillor.
It's not a training course. We want to improve as a school champion. We want to improve the skills.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, gentlemen and ladies. So agenda item number 11 is the update report. And again, that's for Carl and Elaine to present major items from that. Thank you.
Sorry, in agreement with the chair and the committee, I know councillors like to take the report as read. So just a couple of key things from me. I remember a conversation took place at the last committee meeting on the 24th of July, and that was in relation to the relatively small numbers of young people that had engaged with that YAF consultation survey. So one of the key things we've done is taken that feedback on board. We've now created that YAF consultation survey. We've got it out as quickly as possible so that we can hopefully engage with as many young people as possible. And one of the key things now we've got Elaine in post will be for Elaine to work with those community groups, youth organisations to increase those numbers of young people. As I said, Chair, that the survey is live. So there's a couple of means and methods that young people can actually consult with that survey. The first one is they can fill out the survey link. But we've also got a QR code that they can use to fill in the YAF consultation. And the key thing is we're aiming to get as many responses as possible. And as is always the case, Chair, those responses will inform the budget spend for the next financial year.
Thank you. So I think we have already had some of that information and shared it on social media, but if there's anywhere that you haven't shared it to, councillors, please do so. Thank you. Okay, is there any questions from councillors for Carl on that? Councillor Buckley.
Well, you'll all smile at this, but on page 28, under climate change, it says climate change is the single biggest threat to population health. Is it? Who says?
This information has come from Public Health, Councillor Buckley. So we can certainly ask them to give the committee an update following this. Yeah, absolutely. We'll get that information for you.
Any other questions? Councillor Firth.
I just wanted to note one thing, which is that through the initiative, particularly pursued by Councillor Robinson, tomorrow will officially be a year since the anniversary of, since Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. And one of the big things that we certainly do in the Harewood ward is making sure that we leave a legacy of her outstanding 70 plus years of public service. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to follow up on page 31, employment and skills activities and provision. In my request earlier for a paper to come forward on and officers to come forward on broadband and internet and that rollout as well. Within that item, it talks about the number of people who have received training and skills provision in ICT and digital communications. I'd welcome that being included in that, or reference to that in that report. We want to make sense to take both at the same time, if that's okay, Chair.
The first, did you have another question?
Thank you, Chair. Further to our discussion last week briefly and my request, I just wanted to put and mention to the meeting that I am requesting that we bring forward a future committee item on illegal traveller camps, given the spate of the amount that we've particularly had across the outer northeast and particularly in the Harewood ward since the opening of the East Leeds Orbital Road, and to discuss what we're going to do about it given our previous warnings and lack of action since from Leeds City Council. Thank you.
Would you like to clarify who exactly you would like to attend?
Gypsy and Traveller Services and probably Parks. And serious environmental crime.
Thank you. Toby, have you made a note of that? Yeah. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and I promise faithfully, Councillor Buckley and I aren't working in cahoots on this, but I have a genuine and urgent concern around public health, which actually, interestingly enough, is referred to at page 29 of the report. Colleagues will be aware that in parts of the country there have been significant falls in take-up of childhood vaccinations, particularly MMR. I think it'd be really helpful to get something from public health around vaccination take-up, particularly around MMR, particularly around childhood vaccinations, but also actually what the take-up compared to previous around flu and the COVID vaccination programs obviously rolling out, how that is looking, because off the back of obviously very significant pandemic, where are we in terms of ensuring that we're resilient, not just across the city, but across the community committee in terms of what is a very definitive, identified and will make you very, very poorly public health emergency that could well be its way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll make arrangements for somebody to come to the next meeting. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Stables.
Just following up on that, actually, it would be good to get data by ward level if we're able to get that. Yeah, thanks.
So thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. The final agenda item is agenda item number 12, which is the date and time of the next meeting. And it will be on Monday, the 11th of December at 5:30 p.m. here. And I will bring mince pies, Councillor Robinson. I apologise profusely for not having brought biscuits today. Okay, thank you very much. Oh.
No, I know. Okay, I had this last time. Before you close, can I just say something, please? Which was in terms of the next meeting, it was just a query. So, because one of the things that I raised at the end of the last meeting was about these where this meeting is cited. So it was really just to say we were going to consider this going forward as to whether we have to come here, because again, there are no members of public here, and I suspect it is because we're here, we're in Leeds. And, you know, I strongly think, and I have asked other people, you know, where we live, if they're more likely to come if it is in Wetherby Ward. And of course, the answer is yes. So I strongly think we need to consider going forward where this meeting is held.
Can I just say on that point, Councillor Stables, that this has been discussed at length on several previous meetings, and that because of COVID and because of the uptake that we had in people actually watching online on the screening, and also after the meeting, that we were engaging with many more people on that basis than ever turned up at any of the meetings when we went to the communities. Unfortunately, the technical people tell us that it's extremely difficult for security reasons to actually live stream meetings from anywhere in the community. They just don't have the facilities to do it. So it has been discussed several times, but I'm quite happy to put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Please do, because one of the questions again at the end of the meeting, we had a little discussion about it last time, was we asked whether we can have a look at the data to see, in terms of the numbers, what proportion of those people who are watching it are actually council officers, because it was suggested that sometimes, you know, there are topics that come up that are relevant to officers and they are encouraged to watch it. So what's important, it would be really useful to understand, you know, if I don't know how many it is, if there's a couple of hundred people watching it, but actually when they look at it, 100 of them are officers, or because it could be multiple times they're watching it, same people as well. We need a bit more information.
Can ask, but I'm not sure whether they'd be able to do that or not. But we've said that we will discuss it on the next meeting. Toby, would you be able to find that out for us? Councillor Lamb, and then I'm going to close the meeting.
Yeah, we should say, obviously, this was discussed at full council last week on the community committee annual reports, and we suggested as part of the review of community committees that this is something that's looked at. It's a challenge. I think we're all on the same page. We'd like more people to engage, but we also have been here for 17 years, and we have often gone out into the community when we're in treetops in Old Woodley, which isn't available at the minute. Nobody from Wetherby wants to come to Old Woodley, and when we're in Wetherby, no one from Old Woodley or Barrack and Scholes wants to come to Wetherby.
But at least
if-
you've got some people. You've got one ward at a time
But-
then, rather than no one here.
Yeah, but there's nobody came to any of them. But there's it's getting the balance right of making sure it's accessible. But as I say, it was at full council last week, it was discussed, and it is something all of us are agreed on trying to take forward. But not having the opportunity, and people with disabilities who wouldn't be able to come wherever it was, they've got the opportunity to watch us on.
If they are, so that's why more data would be useful, is what I'm saying.
Thank you very much.